Hello, and thank you for joining me for an exploration of myth and metaphor, and how we can use metaphors to unpack situations in our lives and gain insight and understanding from that fresh perspective. The advantage of a fresh perspective is that it pulls you out of your old way of looking at things, where you may have been embroiled and immersed in thought cycles that were not particularly helpful or useful. But before we immerse ourselves in a myth to extract the metaphorical gold, I'd like to first acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders of this country, past, present, and emerging. And now from these shores we go to the mythologically rich shores of Greece, to the land of Homer, and one of the epic poems attributed to him, the Odyssey. Briefly, the Odyssey is the story of Odysseus's very adventurous and arduous 10-year journey home after the Trojan War. And the journey may have followed this route, but we can't be sure because the poem does not identify the specific locations where the famous challenges of the Odyssey occurred. We do know that Odysseus started in Troy and set sail for Ithaca. We are now going to focus on one of his adventures, his encounter with the Sirens. The Sirens lived on an island somewhere in the Mediterranean, and it might well have looked something like this, and Odysseus and his men needed to pass it. No worries. But if we look at this ancient depiction of the myth, you can see that Odysseus is tied to the mast. What you can't see is that his companions have wax in their ears. According to the myth of the Sirens, no mortal is able to withstand their enchanting notes, their flowery meadows, and those who succumb to the Sirens' call are not seen again. Here is a more modern interpretation of the myth. The temporarily deaf companions, who are immune from the seductive call of the Sirens, are rowing like mad, while Odysseus, the only one who can hear them, has been firmly tied to the mast. So let's modernize this a bit to make the myth more relevant to a student. Social media is a major source of distraction, and for a student on a mission, succumbing to and getting lost in the distraction could be disastrous. So the Sirens are a metaphor for social media in our example. Let's take a look at the other elements of this myth and find out how Odysseus succeeded. This is from the Odyssey, which is still available in many formats today. Odysseus is telling his companions what he learned from the enchantress Circe. Then, with a heavy heart, I spoke to my companions thus. Friends, it is not right that only one man, or only two, should know the divine decrees that Lady Circe has uttered to me. I will tell you of them, so that in full knowledge we may die, or in full knowledge escape. It may be from death and doom. Her first command was to shun the Sirens, their enchanting notes, their flowery meadow. I alone was to hear their song, she said. You, for your part, you must bind me with galling ropes as I stand upright against the mast stay, with the rope ends tied to the mast itself. And then I shall stay there immovably. And if I beg and beseech you to set me free, you must bind me hard with more ropes again. So, if we break this down, first we have Odysseus getting critical information, advice or instructions from Circe, who is an enchantress. So, she is wise in the ways of magic and magical beings, such as flying, singing, seducing women. And very importantly, Odysseus takes her advice. He's a very wily, conquering hero, so he could very well have reflected on his successes and believed that he was mentally and physically strong enough to withstand the onslaught. The other thing to consider is the fact that he wants to hear the singing of the Sirens. He doesn't just block his ears or decide to quit the journey, say, well, we won't bother about going home. He wants to gain insight, knowledge, and wisdom from the experience of hearing the sirens. This is the thing with life. We need challenging experiences to grow. Going back to Odysseus on his boat, he makes full use of the resources he has. His companions strap him to the mast. They ignore his pleas when he weakens, and they row like hell. For our modern-day Odysseus, this is the boat, and you may have guessed the back of the chair is the mast. What may seem to be missing from this picture are the companions, but in terms of a metaphor, they are resources, and everyone has inner resources. So our students need to engage their inner resources of willpower and empathy and strap themselves to the mast with a determination, resilience, and tolerance of temporary discomfort. The pairing of determination and empathy is important because determination will keep the boat on course, while empathy acknowledges that it is tough, and it will encourage the person to take care of themselves. And there's another element we need for our student, the oars. This is motivation, a critical element and very good to refer back to when swamped by immediate challenges. Fear and desire are big motivators, but fear of what and desire for what? Taking a moment to touch base with what these are helps pause circular frantic thinking and to put things in perspective in terms of bigger pictures. And it can help to think of them as oars, to make them tools under conscious control, rather than them being unconscious drives that stir up anxiety or conjure up intangible dreams. As well as helping us analyze what is required for us to succeed and to identify our inner resources, the other advantage of using metaphors is that they are fun. It's much easier to settle down to work on an assignment if you invoke a sense of adventure and you imagine yourself as a Greek hero. I hope you have enjoyed this experience of exploring myth and metaphor, and that you have some fun finding other ways of using metaphors to gain new understanding, perspective, and insights that might help you with challenges that you face. Thank you.